morning, everyone. I hope that it's a very rainy morning right now, but I hope that you are excited for today's session. We are going to be speaking to Dulull, who on the topic of taking, I want to make sure I get the topic exactly right. So taking the leap from VFX to directing and producing feature films and TV. My name is Pippa Tshabalala. I am the on-air and creative services manager for the Walt Disney Company Africa. And I'm very happy and proud to say that this session is actually sponsored by Disney. So yay. I'm sure you're all going to have lots of questions for Haz at the end of this. So please just make sure you write them down. There's a little Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. Make sure you pop them in there and we will address all of those afterwards. It promises to be a super exciting session. I've been chatting to Haz for the last little while, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Anyway, I would like to hand over to Dulull. Good morning.
Morning, thanks Pippa. Yeah, it's actually rainy here as well in the UK, so I'm feeling the doom and gloom too. All good. All right, well, thanks for the intro. I'm just going to dive right in because I'm really excited about sharing all my entire journey to everyone here. And thanks for everyone for tuning in, by the way. Super appreciated. All right, so let's share my screen. Let's share it so you guys can see what I'm going to be talking about. All right, cool. Cool, you guys can see that, good, great. Okay, so well, like Pippa said, I'm gonna be talking about my filmmaking journey. And whenever I give these kind of talks, and I've been giving a lot of these talks recently, I always like to give a kind of like a story. And my story always starts from the beginning, which is what kind of got me into all of this madness. And for me, I'm a self-confessed geek, okay? Like, you know, right now I've got all my comic books, I'm wearing my Atari t-shirt, and I've been like that since I was like, I don't know, like 6 or 7 or maybe younger. You know, I kind of grew up in the whole VHS, DVDs days, you know, trying to watch every or any kind of movies I can watch. Ranging from sci-fi to horror. I love anime. I read a lot of manga. Played a lot of video games, like right back from like, you know, on the NES days, right up to like today. And I just love comic books in general, like good stories, a lot of visual narratives. And that naturally led me to my first career, which is in video games. So this was back in, God, 97, 98. Yeah, working on like PlayStation 1 games. And this kind of really shows my age here. You know, in fact, I worked on PlayStation 1 games. And, you know, this was straight out of university. I had got like a one year break. And I worked on game cinematics. So basically the stuff that says not game footage. That was the stuff I worked on. And back then, yeah, I didn't really have a route to going into filmmaking. I knew I wanted to make movies, but back then, like, you know, like my parents were really strict in terms of like, you know, you gotta like, for your A levels or for your university, you should pick stuff that will get you a job. And so I kind of found a compromise, which was, you know, I wanted to do art, design, tech, just everything artistic. And they're like, well, let's kind of meet us halfway here, being the good parents that they are. And I'm like, okay, so I did maths, I did computer programming, and I did art and design. And that naturally, when you put them all together, you know, coding and art, you get video games. So that's how I was able to make the jump into video games. And I was basically telling stories in video games, right? You know, the cutscenes, you know, before a level would start, you'll see the story. So I was making mini movies in video games. Then I got to a point where I should really be working in the film industry. This was after like 5 or 6 years. So I became a visual effects artist. And, you know, I worked on movies like 10,000 BC, Prince of Persia, Hellboy 2. And over the years, around 2007, I think it was, I got an amazing opportunity to work on this little movie called The Dark Knight. And from that, it was a small team set in Pinewood Studios. So Pinewood are the place where they make the big movies. And our job was to figure out from the script what it would look like before we go and shoot it. So that was basically like a moving storyboard, okay? And I learned so much working on previs. You know, I think I would say some of my film school actually, well, like I didn't go to film school, but my film school in essence came from working on previs and visual effects, because in previs you have to learn how to block your camera. You need to learn about storytelling, editorial, pacing, what composition, you know, what can you tell in that one frame? And every director is very different, every script is very different. So I learned a lot about filmmaking, a lot about cinematography, and all those things that you're trying to replicate on a computer that represents film. And then, you know, you can imagine after that, it was very easy to get a job. I kind of climbed up the ladder. So I became a visual effects supervisor. And a VFX supervisor is basically someone that is less doing the effects on the computer and more problem solving with the client. So I'll spend a lot of time with the director or the filmmakers, or for television, it will be the showrunners, the executives, and just trying to figure out how to achieve this big idea on this schedule and on this budget, maybe this budget. And it was challenging. My job was problem solving, but I still was very creative. I would still create concepts and do tests and show the filmmakers, like, you know, how to achieve certain things. And most of my time I'd be like, do you really need visual effects? Maybe get it in camera. Let's try and get it in camera. That's usually like my thing all the time. I've never tried to rely just doing stuff on green screen or CGI. Now, in between my visual effects career, because like we have time in visual effects, right? Yeah, whatever hours I could take, like during the week, it's usually like, you know, midnight when I get back home from work. You know, I'll try to spend an hour a day just putting together short film ideas, because I, you know, essentially want to be a filmmaker. And so I started making these short films in between, and, you know, there's a couple of them there on the slide here. You know, one of them went to Cannes, Vimeo staff pick, and one of them out of all of those actually went viral, and that was this one called Project Kronos, the second one. And it was a time where I was working on documentaries for the BBC, Discovery, and I was just surrounded by documentary filmmakers and the whole world of documentary. But I grew up watching Steven Spielberg movies. I grew up watching movies like Contact by Robert Zemeckis. So I love the science fiction world, right? So I kind of took what I was doing in documentary, took what I was doing, what I love doing with sci-fi and just my nerdiness, put them together and created this fake documentary called Project Kronos. And the thing went viral and getting, you know, millions of views, LA Hollywood agents calling me up, and I was like, whoa, I was expected to do like 9 or 10 and do the festival route. I didn't even do the festival route. There's only one of my, you know, the films did go to festivals, but I never submitted them. I was actually being asked to send them through. So, because you know, most of my, I would say most of my exposure, I would say 99% of my exposure came from just putting stuff online, you know, sharing it with you good folks and getting good feedback and people promoting it. So with Project Kronos, there was a bidding war. But before we get to the bidding war, the big thing I want to tell you is, like, it's not just about putting your short film online and you're like, hey, you get like millions of views. No, you know, there's a lot of work behind that. You know, you have to market a lot. So I would write to all of the various websites that I knew covered science fiction films and say, hey, I've just done this short film. You know, here's the trailer. It's got Vimeo stuff pick and all of that. You know, I think it would be great for you. And people like Gizmondo were kind of like playing it. Firstshowing.net, IO9, and the more these sites cover your stuff, the more people will see it. But you have to put in the work. And I'm going to talk a little bit more later about PR and how important self-PR is and how it costs zero money. It's just your time and energy and drive. But it's the thing that I always kind of instill in people. Like, people ask me, how do you get all this exposure, Has? I'm like, you know, do you have a marketing agency? Do you have a publicist? I'm like, no, I don't have any of that. And I don't want to spend money on that yet. Yeah, right now everything's bootstrapped, right? Yeah, back then it's definitely. So anyway, there was a bidding war. Studio in Hollywood won the rights to it, and they optioned it. And just for those who don't know what optioning is, kind of like when you write a book and they option it for 12 months. So the studio optioned it for 12 months, and they gave me a little money to write it. And I worked with another writer to develop it. And it got to a point where you can see here the article at the bottom, the Variety article, the Big Hollywood Trade Press announcing Project Kronos as a full feature length. Now, we spent like a year, maybe close to 2 years, maybe developing this. And it was great fun. I worked with studio, I worked with executives, I was working with multiple writers, and it was just such a great experience. But there was one little thing that was bugging me in that whole scenario. Oh, by the way, also at the same time, I was hired by Fox and Paramount to write stuff on spec. So, you know, my CV was looking pretty good from a writer's point of view, even though I'm not technically a writer. I'm a director that writes out of necessity, okay? Otherwise, nothing gets greenlit. And so I got to the point where I'm like, why am I not making my first feature? I've got the whole Hollywood thing, but why am I not making stuff? I'm still working in visual effects. And this was around 2015. I was working on like a show called Poldark in the UK as a VFX producer. And I got a lot of support from my industry peers. They're like, yeah, why are you not making movies? Come on, what are you still doing here? So I got to a point where I thought, you know what, I need to make my first feature. So I went back to the guys who, you know, the studio that optioned my Project Kronos, and it came to a point where the option lapsed. Basically, that means that, you know, it goes through turnaround. When it's 12 months over, they can either renew it or give it back to you. And they wanted to renew it, And I'm like, okay, that's cool. But before I take your check, what are we doing? And they're like, well, we'll put it through development. And by that time, it was like a $30 million movie. I won't be able to get that now, let alone back then. It was like Interstellar meets Gravity. I mean, it was really cool. But there's no way it was going to be made. Not with a first-time filmmaker. And that was the thing. I was in first-time director stigma in the industry. And what that meant was, doesn't matter how many short films you want, how many awards, how viral your stuff has gone. If you haven't made that feature film to financiers and to studios, you're still a first-time filmmaker. So I had to get out of that. And I spoke to a lot of agents and my manager, and they're like, you just kind of need to do what this filmmaker did, Gareth Edwards. Just go off and make your film yourself and keep it low, dirty, guerrilla style, but something that feels quite big and high end, but respect, it's kind of your voice. So I had some money saved up for to buy a house. So you know where this is going, right? And I was like, buy a house, make a movie, buy a house, make a movie. I'm like, oh, you know what? And my partner's very supportive. She was like, look, make the movie. Otherwise, you're just going to be, you'll never know, right? You might as well just try it. If you mess up, you mess up. At least you know you tried it, but don't mess up, kind of thing. And so I took a year out from visual effects. That's around 2016. And I already had a version that I was going to make. So when I took the rights back, by the way, from the studio, I said, listen, I'm not going to renew the rights. I'm going to go off and make the movie the way I want to make it. They're like, cool, go ahead. You have our blessing. Just don't make the script that we paid you to write. I'm like, no, there's no way I can make that. It's super expensive. I'm going to go back to what made the short film popular, which is the fake documentary. And at that time, there were studios like Blumhouse that were doing films like Paranormal Activity. There's a lot of found footage. The genre of found footage was very big. Josh Trank, the director, did a film called Chronicle. And of course, there's the amazing Neil Blomkamp movie, District 9. And it all had that very grounded grittiness to it, which I felt documentary would serve really well. And considering I spent a lot of time in documentaries. And I had visual effects background. So I spent a year putting that together, and it became this. So let me just show you a clip or the trailer of what that movie became. All right, here goes.
Do you understand the classified nature of this mission and the legal non-disclosure agreements that you sign, which prohibit you from ever discussing this project to anyone outside of this room?
I understand.
And you understand the full nature of this program?
Yes, I'm fully aware.
This is light and cosmic matter entering and leaving. So what we're potentially looking at here is a wormhole. And we believe that this activity occurred at the same time as the strange dark orbs that have been appearing in our skies.
Talking about probably one of the most important things that has happened in space exploration. And I think we need to move forward on that. I think we need to move forward now.
We could be looking at first contact with intelligent life.
It's the possibility of something else out there for us.
It changes everything.
It's that simple notion which drives the Human 2.0 project.
We could not have been more wrong about all of this.
All right, so there you go. So that was a trailer for The Beyond. And yeah, I'm going to give you a little backstory now on how that got put together and stuff. But basically, I spent a whole year shooting that, using my own money. And what's the interesting thing is before I spent any money on making this thing, because I'm spending my own, I'm going to be careful not to waste anything, right? And I phoned up a bunch of distributors that I had already made relationships with, doing the whole trips to LA and back and forth. I remember calling them and saying, hey, I'm making my first feature. They're like, cool, who's financing, man? I'm like, I am. They're like, oh, okay. So I'm like, okay, I need some honest advice here. And the main thing I wanted to know was, what are distributors looking for in 2 years' time? And I knew studios, distributors, sales companies, they all kind of look several years in advance. You know, like Marvel looks 4 years in advance for their range of IP, and everyone was like, sci-fi's big thing. We love sci-fi. We want sci-fi. And I'm like, cool, but what are you specifically looking for in independent sci-fi, not the big tentpole movie sci-fi? They go, look, you know, we love movies about AI. We love first contact alien stories. We love grounded stories. We love heart and character. But we are we love space exploration. We love more space movies. Yes, please. But for the love of God, please don't do another alien invasion movie. We have so many alien invasion movies. So I'm like, okay, so that's why when you watch a film, it's not about an invasion, it's about making first contact. So I pretty much had this checklist on my board from distributors, you know, knowing that if I make a film that kind of check these boxes in a very smart and creative way, I've got a chance of my film getting out there, at least being picked up for sales. And to also remember, I've got to make the life of the sales companies and the distributors a bit easy to sell. Otherwise, if I make something too nichey, you know, it's going to be hard for them to sell. And I needed to have something that sold because it's my own money, right? Yeah, so one of the things we did was, you know, I spent the whole 2016 shooting that. A friend of mine, a producer friend, said, hey, have you screen tested this yet? I'm like, what? They're like, so have you screen tested? I'm like, what screen tested? They go, basically, you just get a bunch of people in a room, you know, different people like filmmakers, film goers, non-film people, you know, unofficial journalists, come in and watch a movie and just give some notes and just audience notes. It's up to you whether you take them or not, just so you prepared what it's going to be like when you release the movie. I'm like, that's actually a really good idea. Scary, but good idea. So we did it, and I have to say it was very scary at the time because, like, you spent like 2 years, or you know, you're putting your heart and soul into it, and then you're like, someone could rip it to pieces. Anyway, we got some notes back, and you get some like random notes, like subjective ones, like, oh, I don't like her hair, or I don't like what she's wearing, or I don't like her accent. You're like, okay, that's subjective. But the common thread was there was just 2 big notes. The first big note was, we're confused. That was the version that you guys will never see. But that was the first cut. The first cut was like, we're confused. Like, what are we watching? Are we watching a documentary? Because we starts off documentary, then you have these beautiful visual effects shots, and you cut to documentary, like, we're confused. What are we watching? So that was a serious note. I'm like, you know, I should really look into that. And the second note was, you know, too many people. Who are we following? We know it's a documentary, but even documentaries have a protagonist and someone that you root for, someone that you don't like. And there's a journey of some character, even though you've got tons of people in the documentary. So I'm like, okay, now at that point, I have to stress that the sales company, the distribution company, loved the movie already. They were going to release it in 3 months' time. So they already was like, we're going to release this as, you know, we love it. I'm like, yeah, no, I just did a screen test, and there's some notes that kind of concern me, and I really think I should address them. They're like, oh, but we love the trailer. So now I could have just said, hey, I've got the deal with the sales company. They're going to release it. Or I could like, well, hang on, let's think about it. I edited the movie. So how hard is it to just try the notes out? And that's an ethic that I took with me right through today, where that's how I look at notes. You know, like at first I used to think, what are you giving me notes for? What do you know? Was now I'm like, hey, just hear the notes out. What's the worst that can happen, right? You just try them out. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. You know, no one's telling you that you have to do the notes or your future's doomed, right? So I opened the edit. I started editing, started realizing, oh, there's a lot of things I could do better here and trim. But the big one was I had about 400 visual effects shots that I had to redo essentially to make them look made it look crap in order to make it fit like in a grungy ground, because they look too slick in 4K because they're beautifully rendered CG, right? And computers always render stuff that looks super perfect, but as we know, in your camera's always got the imperfections. So I'm like, oh my god, what am I gonna do? And this is where you are put in a box and you realize you're so restricted, you have to come up with an idea that works within that box. And my box was I had 3 months to do 400 visual effects shots. There's no way I was going to get them done. Even if I brought people on, it was just no way to get them done. So a light bulb idea bing, happened. And that light bulb idea was, I called up my cinematographer, Adam Matcher. I had him come over the weekend, bring a 4K Blackmagic camera, and bring lots of black sheeting and curtain, because we're going to shoot something in this room here. He's like, what are we doing? What are we shooting in your room? I'm like, trust me, it'll make sense. And what I did was I had my Apple Mac Retina screen, the really nice IMAX, and I play back all the visual effects back into camera. So really, it wasn't really like a new thing. It's old school, like 1930s, man. They're doing front projection, right? And really what I was doing was playing the visual effects back in camera, but then I was kind of doing out of focus on the lens, tapping the side, you know, putting a bit of light on the side, get some flares, and really making the picture feel a bit imperfect, like someone guerrilla shot these visual effects scenes. And it worked. I mean, at first we're like 50-50, this is gonna work or not. But when you cut it with the documentary Talking Heads, it felt like it was shot on the same camera. And you can see here behind the scenes on the slide, that was what I was doing, just playing back. So this, on the image on the left, the screen left, you'll see the matte retina screen, and at the bottom, that's the viewfinder from the camera. And it worked. And then, you know, later on, we're getting reviews like CineFX magazine or like saying, hey, you know, this independent film looks like the visual effects are so good that it looks like it was shot in camera. And that's obviously a term they use for really good visual effects. But I'm thinking, no, mate, they're literally shot in camera. So anyway, so that's one of many examples of problem solvers that I had to do to get my feature film made. Let's go to the next one. Now, remember I mentioned about self-PR and how super, super, super important it is? Well, here's the thing. Just like I did in my short film, I did the same thing on my feature. In fact, more importantly for my feature, because I want people to watch this thing, right? I want people to buy the film. And so I reached out to the journalists and the press and the websites that were fans of my short film. Say, hey, look, do you remember you covered my film a few years ago? Well, hey, I got some development, man. I've made it into a feature. Now, journalists, website, they love follow-up stories. They love, especially the underdog stories, right? But they love those kind of stories to show progressive, you know, that how our directors progress from short films to filmmaking, feature films. So they covered it and, you know, gave them exclusive, the release for the trailer. And, you know, like for Showing.net covered it, Wired magazine covered it. And now here's the thing I want to talk to you a little bit about is you don't spam out your press release to every journalist, because it becomes apparent, like they all talk to each other and they all know that that's the same email, or you just copy and paste it. There's no intimacy there. So yeah, I took time out and spent time looking at the various websites that hadn't covered my stuff, and Wired was one of them. I read Wired in the morning, and I get all my ideas, ideas from Wired, like, because it's so technology driven, so relevant today. And I'm like, what can I present to Wired to say, hey, can you at least look into my film? And I couldn't say, hey, check out my film, because they're not a film magazine, they're a technology magazine, okay? So I'm like, okay, well, my film dives into the subject of transhumanism, where we're mixing robotics with human genetics to create the next generation of astronauts. And I knew there's a lot of transhumanism type topics being in every issue of Wired. So I kind of used that angle, and they loved it. They go, this is a great angle. Space.com was a little bit easier because it's a movie about space. But again, you can't say, hey, I got a movie about space. Would you feature it? You got to like really tap into what are you doing special that gives them something to latch onto, something to kind of like a hook, right? And my hook was, you know, this is a movie, it's about space exploration, but more importantly, we're looking at the unsung heroes of mission control. And that was my film, was about the woman who has to run this entire mission. It wasn't necessarily about the astronaut had to go up there like typical Hollywood tropes. I wanted to go something a bit more unique. So that helped massively, having all that PR. Again, you know, tapping into my visual effects industry as well. Wasn't just film, wasn't just tech, but also I went back to my visual effects colleagues and, you know, magazines like 3D Artist, 3D World, CineFX, and they covered it. And again, they loved the story of a visual effects artist type filmmaker and what visual effects techniques did I use to make my film on a very low budget independent. So they loved that. So you have angles for everything, okay? And all of this self-PR led to something that really made me think, oh my God, it was so worth it. And that was around 2017, around Christmas. There's this website called Looper. It's like popular culture website for entertainment news and so on. They do this thing like top 10 movies to look out for. I'm going to play you a clip, because then you'll know why I was so like, whoa, mind blown. So let me just hide my video so that you can see it. Oops, that's not how you hide your videos. Have a look. All right, stop video. All right, check this out, guys.
Enthusiasts, from a new entry to the Star Wars franchise, to big budget book to screen adaptations, to some very novel property ideas. Here's a look at what the next year holds in store for the cinematic genre. The Beyond. This feature-length debut from Dulull, who previously worked as a visual effects artist on films like The Dark Knight and Hellboy 2, will be a loose adaptation of his 2013 short film Project Kronos. The Beyond is set in the near future when robotically augmented astronauts embark on an interstellar journey through a recently discovered wormhole. Judging by the trailer, we're in for a wild ride when this premieres on digital streaming services on January 9th. Maze Runner: The Death Cure, the third adaptation of James.
So there you go. I've also put the light on, guys, because I think I was going into like darkness. It's going a bit of a dark tone. So anyway, so you can see here, that video just like blew my mind. I'm like, oh my God, there's like this amazing Ready Player One, and then you got Maze Runner, and you got this little movie, this independent movie in between that's got no big name stars or anything. It's been featured, and you can imagine that helped propel the release of the film hugely. And we end up being on iTunes. You know, on the first week of release, it was #2 in the iTunes, next to Blade Runner 2049 and Wonder Woman. And there's something kind of special and kind of emotional. Even though I'm getting kind of overwhelmed thinking about it now. But like the film that got me in the industry, in terms of like got me wanted to make movies, was the movie Blade Runner. And my dad bought a VHS copy home one day. I was like 12, and I watched it. I'm like, wow. So for me to have my first movie next to the sequel of Blade Runner, I was like, I was going, Dad, I've made it. And I was like, proud of you, son. So so that was really cool. And you know, it did really well on iTunes. It was like #2 for like several weeks. And then, you know, we sold to various territories. We sold to like, you know, Amazon and so on. And then about 6 months later, Netflix comes in and go, hey, you know, we'll like to give you a deal for 1 year to play in Europe, Australia, New Zealand territories. And again, that helped. So you can imagine, I recouped my budget pretty quick. In fact, the first quarter or the second quarter, I think it was, we recouped my entire budget back. I was in profit, and with the money, with the profit, you know, there were certain people that were deferred, paid the deferred off, and that felt really good to be the guy that stuck with his words. Go, no, I made money. Here's the money. I didn't pay you, like, instead of paying you, I don't know, like 10 grand for your work, I only paid you 5. Well, here's the other 5 now because I made money. So that felt really good, and that's something I always advise every producers to honor your deferred deals, especially when you've made it. You know, if you haven't made any money, obviously you can't honor your deal, right? But in my case, I did. And the rest of the money, I set up my own production company, which is what I'm doing today. I run my own production company, developing content and so on. But yeah, the story doesn't really stop there. Here's the thing. Remember I told you about the first time director stigma thing? Well, I actually got into my second feature. In fact, the minute that Looper thing came out, the financiers for Origin Unknown said, hey, we want to greenlight your movie now. You're no longer a first-time director. I'm like, oh, okay. So that is why when you look on my IMDb, there's like 2 movies come out in the same year. Doesn't mean I made them the same year. It's just the release time was both the same. And Origin Unknown was actually much more traditional. So I'm going to talk about that while I'm playing in the background. You can watch all of these trailers on my website as well, and or YouTube and stuff, but definitely my website. So basically, this one's a very interesting story because remember I made my short films and one went viral and I got, you know, this whole Hollywood thing, and I went to LA several times. Well, you know, they always ask you this typical question: what else have you got in your treasure trove? And I'm like, oh, I've got tons of ideas. And I've got these like random ideas. And one of the ideas was like this cube appears on Mars. And then the whole story is about this mission controller in the future. It's just they only have one mission controller. Everything's AI. And she has to work with this AI to solve the biggest mystery of Mars. And it's kind of like Flight and Navigator. It's kind of like Space Odyssey. You know, it's kind of like Kubrick vibe. And no one wanted to make a movie about Mars back then because, like, you know, Mars movies were just like jinxed or something. And then Ridley Scott made a film called The Martian that did really well, and everyone's like, oh, we want that Mars script of yours. So that got into production. That was a much more traditional type movie. It was made for like, I don't know, like $1 million or something like that, UK. And a really great actress, Katie Sackhoff, that was in, you know, I was a huge fan of Battlestar Galactica, so it was great to be able to work with someone that you're a huge fan of. And this was a good case where you should meet your heroes because she was super lovely to work with, so collaborative. She pretty much like, it's her movie because it's all about her and her character, which was amazing, kind of like Moon. And, you know, it wasn't like guerrilla or anything, you know, we had a big stage set and everything. We, you know, it was a proper movie. And that was a great experience. But for me, what was important, it had a theatrical release. And as a filmmaker, it's important to get a theatrical release. It's kind of like the check boxes, right? So, yeah, I had my Netflix thing and now I've got a theatrical release. And it was a limited theatrical, but it was nice to be able to go to LA, see the AMC, and it's like, it's playing in cinema. So that was quite cool. Now that led me to the Disney Plus or the Disney Channel series. called Fast Lane. Now, a lot of people, when they heard about that, they're like, how does someone go from making dark science fiction movies to happy Disney Channel? And there's a good story about that. So basically what happened was when Origin Unknown, the trailer came out, they do these 30-second spots and one of the clips was Katie Sackhoff and the AI robot having this emotional moment together. It was kind of like my homage to Flight of the Navigator. You know, for those who remember, it's one of that classic movie about the kid and the alien robot, you know, solving stuff. And it really had a special place in my heart, that movie. So the guys at Disney obviously saw that, reached out to my manager, hey, listen, you know, we're looking for directors for this new show. It's we can't say much about it, but it involves a talking car and these two young girls. It's kind of like Knight Rider for kids, right? And I pitched on it. But what I did was, instead of sending an email to, oh yeah, I love this idea and project, I went full out. You know, I'd made 2 movies. I had some time now, kind of recuperating on the adrenaline rush. I thought, you know what, I'm just going to put together a 50-page pitch deck, kind of animatic, did some previews, and just threw everything in there. It's not like every day I get the pitch to Disney, right? So I may as well go full in. And they were really impressed. They're like, wow, yeah, first off, we don't have a script. So the fact that you designed the car and you've done all of this work out of just, you know, initiative, you should come over and see us. We think you'll be a great fit for this. You know, I had a couple of Zoom calls. Well, actually, we use this thing called Blue Gene, which is a communication tool over at Disney. And I talked to the executives, spoke to the showrunner. They were like, yeah, you seem like the right guy, but you know, come over. So I was going to be in LA anyway in January 2018, promoting, you know, The Beyond and getting ready to promote the second movie too. I went in and pitched them this idea and saying, you know, what I would do. Now, bear in mind, I'd never directed television, let alone kids television. I've got these 2 feature films and a visual effects background, but I was a VFX supervisor and a VFX producer on several television shows, so that kind of had that a little bit, I guess. And you know, there was a room full like 30 people in that room in Disney, which I didn't know it was going to be that many people actually, because they said it's going to be informal. But anyway, never to say, I went in and they were like, you know, asking these questions like, how are you going to deliver this? You know, do you have experience of working with budgets like this and all of this stuff? And it's going well. And then the showrunner, Matt Dearborn, who's a dear friend of mine now, super great. You know, I owe a lot to him for like graduating in the film and television under his kind of like his coach's mentorship. So he was amazing. But at the time, he was like the guy in the room, like, I don't know, man. Can you do comedy? That's all I need to know. I know you can do all these beautiful visuals, and I know you can do really cool action, but like, can you do comedy? I'm like, this is the moment where I know I'm not going to get the job. So I'm just going to go out in style. So I'm like, well, you know, it's comedy subjective, right? They're like, yeah, nice one, very funny. But no, seriously, give us an example how you are going to make this scene comedy. Like, pick a scene in the script. Now, before I jumped onto the plane, they gave me the script, you know, fully NDA and everything. I read the pilot script, really cool, very energetic. And I picked the car chase scene. And there's this, so basically, just quick backstory. You know what, before the backstory, let me just show you what Fast Lane is, right? And then you'll see how I got the gig. All right, so let me just play that real quick. All right, here goes.
Do you ever feel like there just aren't enough hours in the day? Not me.
Scheduling is my jam.
My name's Vin.
Let's do it.
We're connected. We can do a ton of cool stuff together. Play video games,
No.
make nachos,
No!
take a bath.
No way! Fight like brother and sister.
No, we don't.
Your life will go
Why are you connected to this car?
from 0
Buckling up.
to hey-yo!
This is crazy. Totally. Now pull over it. I got a bar.
Not on the seats.
Fastlane, a Disney Channel miniseries coming to Disney Channel.
Do you ever feel like there just aren't enough hours in the day? Not me.
So there you go.
Scheduling is
So
my
that was,
jam.
I just love it. Totally. So that was great fun. Now, basically, going back to that story when I had to pitch it, right? So they're going, look, pick a scene that you think would be funny and that how would you pull it off as a comedy action? And so you saw in that trailer, there's a little snippet of a car chase sequence. And the fact that I got to put a car chase in a Disney Channel show was pretty cool. And so I thank the guys at Disney for allowing me to go mental with that. And so basically, I just got my phone and I just kind of tuned out. Just imagine the scene go, the whole place is a bubble. All I can hear is just my voice now. And I'm like, you're going to mess up in style. And I'm like, okay, so I picked this car chase scene, and the idea is Lane is this overachiever girl, and her friend Zora is this kind of like the opposite of her. She's homeschooled, like, hey, if it happens kind of thing. And it's kind of like, you know, my pitch was basically to the guys like Lethal Weapon for kids, where you get the two opposites in a car, it's going to be chaos. Another reference was Bad Boys, right? Get the two like Will Smith and Martin Lawrence together. So that was like the kids' version of that. The fact I had to reference those movies, well, yeah. So was kind of fresh and new for Disney, by the way. So I did this whole pitch where I had my phone, they're being chased, and you know, Zora wants cupcakes, but they're getting chased in a way, and they find this bridge and they spin in slow motion because the bridge out, and as they're spinning, there's popcorn flying over. Doesn't matter where the popcorn comes from because it's a movie. It's just there. And then we go down and she notices the cupcakes. She's like, oh my God, cupcakes. And Lane's like, what? We're going to die. Anyway, I did it way better. I'm way more crazy than I am now. Like several years later now, I'm much more wiser. Anyway, the car stops, spins, she's disheveled, like, we're never doing that again. And Zora's like, well, we're going to get cupcakes, right? Anyway, so that was my thing, end scene. And everyone burst out laughing. Like, Sharon was like, you're a funny guy, Has. And I'm like, okay. And to this day, I don't know if he was like laughing at me or the scene. Who cares? I got the gig. And what was really cool is I got to direct the pilot. And at the time, I didn't know I was going to direct the pilot. I was just having to direct an episode. I was just like super happy to be doing something with Disney, right? You know, amazing. But no, you're going to get direct the pilot. And this is a huge risk on Disney's point, I think, because the fact that I'd never done TV, kids television, and it's a pilot, and you know, for those who don't know, the pilot sets the tone for the entire series when other directors come on and do the other blocks, right? So it was an 8-part limited series, 8 episodes, and I directed 4. Now, originally I was hired to do the first block, which is the first 2, episode 1, episode 2, the pilot, and episode 2. And I remember doing it in Vancouver. We shot it and everything. You know, it was amazing shooting in Vancouver, by the way. I love Vancouver. And it was a Thursday. Finished shooting, getting ready to go home, probably like the week after. One of the PAs at Disney were like, hey, you know, they're going to screen your pilot, by the way, like next week, just to like review it. I'm like, wait, what? But there's loads of green screen everywhere. That there's a CG car there's not there. You know, there's no CG yet. And they're like, yeah, don't worry, they get it. And I came from a visual effects supervising background where I worked with a lot of clients, and I always heard clients go, yeah, we get it. We know what work in progress is. We get it. Just show us stuff. And then they come back with a million notes going, well, why is this edge look like? Is it going to look like this? Really, guys? I mean, really, there's no color here. Why is there red crosses over there? I'm like, it's tracking markers. So I remember all of that stuff. And I'm like, oh, no, this is my first Disney show. I've got to give a good impression. So I walked into the edit room over the weekend and I started editing, and the editor's like, hey, you know, we have editors for that. It's not Gorilla Film here. This is Disney. But they were super cool. Canadians are cool in general. And they were like, look, what do you need to do? I'm like, I want us to get this pilot at a presentable stage. I know there's no visual effects yet. Visual effects don't start 6 months. So I phone up the VFX house and say, could you send me a CG car model? And they go, yeah, sure, weirdo. What do you want it for? You don't start visual effects. Aren't you the director? I'm like, yeah, but I'm going to put together something. I'm like, okay, cool, it's your funeral. So they sent me the thing, and VFX supervisor called Andrew Carr over in Canada, in Vancouver, for a company called Atmosphere, who are just an amazing visual effects company. And so they sent me over this car, and I put it in. I started on my laptop, comping in After Effects, the editors putting together this rough scene, and everything was roughly keyed, but there was no holes in the edit. And that was very important for me, just so that they can really see the vision of what I was going for. They screened it on Monday. I get a phone call from Disney go, wow, some of these visual effects are really good. We didn't know we greenlight visual effects. I'm like, no, they're rough, they're not finished. So anyway, they would say, basically, Disney was super, super happy. And they're like, look, we'd like to keep you on to do the last block. So you get to start the show and end the show. I'm like, wow, 4 episodes out of 8. That's freaking cool, man. Oh, and also we want you to stay on as an exec producer. I'm like, what do you mean? Because basically we want you to kind of like oversee the show creatively in terms of the tone. Because there's a lot of CG, but there's a lot of action. And our team doesn't really necessarily do that kind of thing. And the executives at Disney really like the way you work with everyone. Everyone likes working with you and so on. So I stayed on for like 7 months or something in Vancouver and just overshowed your work closely with the showrunners. And that was a great experience, because here's the thing, guys. Feature film is a director's medium. The directors are the rock stars on feature films. For television, it's a writer's medium, okay? So it's really driven by writers. It's the writer's room. You have the showrunners, you have the executives. It's so writer-driven. So I knew I have to like be just so married to the showrunner, be married to the writer's room and work closely with the writers. And that was a great experience. I learned so much about it. In a way, I kind of wish feature films were done like television, where they have read-throughs, table reads, and writers' room. I really wish I had that because it's such a different experience, but very collaborative as well, which was nice. That led me on to directing the Bridge franchise film for Descendants. So I was in post-production on the last few episodes of Fast Lane, and I get a call from Disney Original Movies. So it's that next floor up from the Disney building. And I go, hey, listen, we got this thing called Descendants. Descendants 2 was a big, massive movie that was released. We're making Descendants 3, but it doesn't come out till next year or so. So we want to create a bridge movie, kind of like what they did on Blade Runner 2049 or other films. They do these little mini short films, but we're doing this one short film. We're going to get the cast from the Descendants to be in this, and we want to reveal this dark secret thing that's going to appear in the next movie. And we'd love for you to direct it. I'm like, okay, what's Descendants? I have no idea. Is it the George Clooney film? They're like, no, it's not the George Clooney film. So they sent me the screeners, and I watched it. I thought, this is really cool. This is really fun. Again, why me? Because like, it's a musical, it's not really my thing. And they're like, no, don't worry about the musical side of it. We just want you to, like, here's a script, and it's a really dark script. We kind of want to do the Stranger Things thing, vibe to it. But we love what you did at Fast Lane, and we're looking for a fresh take on it, but keep it quite dark, but yet respect the brand of Disney. And that's a very important thing working for Disney, was the fact that it's so brand driven. And in a way, that's really cool, because that means I know what my parameters are. And again, just like back when I was doing the Beyond, where I had this box, I had some of my best ideas came out. It's kind of like working with Disney, where you got all these parameters to work with, and your jobs as filmmakers are how do you tell a story, or how do you tell the story from the script while respecting the brand of Disney and embracing the brand of Disney. And I loved it. It was super fun because my stuff's very colorful and Disney stuff's very colorful. So that really worked out for me. Let me just play a little clip of that just so you know what I'm talking about. In fact, I might just play it.
Mal! What are you doing way out here?
I was walking through the woods. I came across this glowing orb thing. Dizzy? Are you okay? Wait, are you? Dizzy, why are you wearing Uma's necklace?
There you go. So I got to do that, which was awesome. And again, that was back in Vancouver as well. So that was just a whirlwind. 2018 was a whirlwind for me. Like, just so much happened. And in 2019, last year, quiet. Nothing happened. I wasn't on set making films. I was in what you call development phase now. And I almost forgot about development phase because I realized, there's this thing called scripts and they take a while to make. And I got my production company. I hired, I partnered up with a producing partner called Paula. She came on. She looked at the producing side with me. And, we were like developing projects. But I was like, I want to make stuff. I want to get back on set. Or I got the bug. But, you're not going to make it unless you don't have a script, right? So, there are several projects in development. One of them is called Luna, which we're supposed to be shooting soonish, but we're going to shoot next year. And I felt like, well, while the script's in development, I was working with the writer. I was doing little mini storyboards, just to flesh out the movie. Why not just do some previs, right? And I did previs on The Dark Knight, so that became very useful for me. But I didn't want to hire a previs team or hire or just rent Maya or those expensive Autodesk software. I just I didn't have the budget for that. And also even though I got my own production company, I'm bootstrapping. We don't have a building. Everyone works from home. Everyone's remote. That was back 2019, and this year it's kind of normal now, right? Thank God I didn't get a building. And so I really wanted to bootstrap, be sensible. I didn't want to be the production company. I would just spend loads of money, hire tons of people, have an office, and then you're not making anything. I didn't want to be that. And my producing partner, Paula, felt the same as well. So I decided to do previs, and I'm like, how do I do this myself on my laptop that I can just take my time and do what I want without spending any money? And I've been hearing about this thing called Unreal Engine, which is a game engine used to make the games Fortnite. And, a lot of filmmakers I'm seeing out there were using it. A lot of studios are using it for previs and as well as video games. So I downloaded it. It's free to download. And I learned it over a weekend. There's tons of tutorials online. I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to move the camera, put some objects and just move the camera and export it. That's all I need to know. So I just Googled that and there's tons of resources. I was actually very surprised in how much support and resources there was out there to do with Unreal, by the way. It was just mind blown. And so let me just show you look behind the scenes what I was doing. And what I was doing was essentially blocking out the shots here. Here's my astronauts on the moon. Here's my camera. I made a virtual set and kind of getting the right composition, and just kind of create all these various shots. And it felt like being on a movie set, you know, pyro explosions without the warrior doing it on set. But this was all supposed to be previs. But I got to a point, I'm like, this is looking a bit too good to be previs. Like, I don't remember previs having reflections, shadows, fire, flames, and all of this stuff that is usually very expensive from a graphics point of view. I'm getting all this in real time. Yeah, I'm not sitting there waiting for renders. As I'm moving the camera, it's like being on set. And it got me really thinking, like, hang on, maybe I could do pitch viz, right? So previs is like blocking out your shots, but what about if I create something like a proof of concept, but without going out to shoot it and spending tons of money to shoot a proof of concept? Why don't I just do all in Unreal Engine, right? And just to show a snippet of tone, mood, direction, and why this film's going to be so badass that the sales companies have to be on board, and why actors should come on this, right? So I put together this pitch viz. And so this is a pitch viz I did last year in Unreal Engine 4.22. We're in 4.25 now. But this is my first time using Unreal, so it's a little bit hokey. But it'll give you an idea on why it got me super excited and how I started to get the bug for real time. So let me just stop my video. Here you go. All right, so as it's playing now, so you can see the power I was having in my hands on my laptop with just basic CG assets to create the mood and tone of the film. And it was great because we were still in script development stage, right? So I'll be creating this stuff and the writer will be like, oh, wow, so that's what's in your head. Because as you know, everyone reads the script and they interpret the script very different in their head. And it's very important for people to see what's in my head and what the vision is, but also to help the writer that I'm working with to really write a script that we knew we were going to shoot and what it's going to be like, and there's consistency in the vision and tone, and that everyone was on board with the tone as well. So we showed that to various sales companies, distributors and so on, and even cast, because we're casting some big names on this, and to get them excited. And they're like, well, this is what the movies will look like. This is great. Now, here's the thing. A lot of people came back assuming that the film was going to be an animated film, because they'd seen previous, they've seen like animatics, which is like, you know, storyboards, moving storyboards, but no one had seen anything that looked like a mini movie. So some of them were like, hey, is this a first pass of an animated film? This is great. I'm like, no, this is not, no, it's a live action film. This is just pitch this to show what my tone is, and direct go, oh wow, well definitely we get your tone and direction. This is very cool. We just never seen previous or pitch viz at that quality. And it got me thinking, and I'm like, wow. And I'm like, you know, if we could do this in real time, then, you know, if we put a little bit more love and time into building the assets and really utilizing Unreal Engine, couldn't we make finished content this way, right? And I'm like, surely I'm not the only one thinking this. And I'm not, you know, you go online, you go to the virtual production group and the Unreal Engine Facebook group, and there's loads of amazing filmmakers doing these like clips and short films. But what about actual feature films and television shows? Why is no one doing that? You know, it's a great way to do independent animation films this way, as opposed to having big studios to do that stuff. But I needed to have a project to do this, a commercial project. And it was that serendipity or something. Like I get a LinkedIn message from the owner of a comic book company called T-Pop Comics, and this guy called Neil Gibson. He goes, hey, I'm a huge fan of your work. We should meet for coffee. And, you know, we started talking about the industry and stuff. And he gave me these comic books. He goes, listen, we're looking for directors, filmmakers to just kind of create proof of concept of one of our comic book stories. Because we're in the world of television, right? We're in the golden era of television. We have HBO Max, Netflix, Amazon, we have Quibi, we have tons more, right? They all need content. And a lot of comic book companies like Image Comics, Dark Horse, and so on are moving their IP into television because they're great material, they're great stories to tell. That's why we have shows like Umbrella Academy on Netflix, which I love, by the way, or The Boys on Amazon, which is also very cool. And they're all from comic books. So I picked the story in this anthology called Theory, and there's different stories about this woman called Linda who goes around astroarchaeologists trying to solve mysteries of different planets. And there's one all about these big giant mech suits. And like I said earlier on, I'm like, the first thing on this presentation, I love manga and anime. I love like animes like Patlabor and Gundam. I love all that stuff, but never got a chance to do those stuff, right? So I'm like, I want to do this one, big giant mech suits. But then they showed me the budget they had, which was very, very little. I'm like, oh, that's a damper. I don't know, man. And like, well, yeah, can you not just create something with that budget? I'm like, I know. For me, it's very important as a filmmaker that everything I do is better than my last thing. It's that saying that you're only as good as your last job. And I do want us to create another grungy lo-fi budget movie or something that just the same thing I did a year ago. It had to be better and better and better. I mean, I just did a Disney show. So I've got to top that, right? So like quality-wise and stuff. So I kind of like parked it for a day, and then I saw the trailer for like Love, Death and Robots. I'm like, ooh, there's a big appetite for adult animation. So I reached back to them and said, hey, listen, how about we do it as animation? And they were a bit confused at first, I have to admit. They were like, wait, didn't you just say you didn't have enough money to do this live action? Now you want to do animation? Like animation's like 3 times more, dude. Like you need a big studio and stuff. I'm like, no, I think there's a way we could do this that doesn't use conventional CGI methods. I think we can use real-time tech. And they're like, what? I'm like, all right, I tell you what, give me a week. I'm going to put together a test of what we can do in my company. And that will set the benchmark. And it was important for me to do this test to basically show, set expectations. Very important, client expectations. You don't want to say, oh, well, we could do Love, Death and Robots episode 1 for that budget. So I wanted to let them know that this is what you're going to get for the money, but also for me to know if we can pull this off, because this was essentially going to be a proof of concept. And well, it was actually going to become a pilot, by the way, because we then decided to make this a TV show. And this was kind of like me in my room, like in this room actually, just playing with Unreal Engine, trying to create some camera moves with the iPad. And it really felt like I was like holding the camera, and we started blocking out shots using that. And what I did was I downloaded free assets from Epic's marketplace. So this thing called Paragon game assets. You just download them for free. Everything was for free. I didn't build anything. I just wanted to show a test, right? Put these characters together and kind of told a little story on what my direction would be, what the quality of the animation would be, and the overall thing. And this is kind of what I put together. There you go. Test I did, and I showed it to them, and they're like, whoa, okay, go off and make the thing. We're never ever going to quiz you again. That was great. As long as you can do that quality on that budget and you're comfortable, go off and do it. And it was a tough project because it was not like I was making a shit ton of money out of it. I was going to be rich on anything, but it was enough to hire myself and hire 2 other artists to come on board and help me and have a team, and as well as hire actors with voices and stuff. The budget accommodated, but more importantly, I needed to have a commercial project to kind of showcase, say, we can make animated films using Unreal. It's all good saying, in theory we could, here's a demo. I needed to create something that beginning to end that felt like a commercial product. So the team was put together. Obviously there's me I'm sure I did way more than all those other things in there, but there you go. And I hired Ronan Aitan, who is this amazing TD, technical director guy, who did all the pipeline. Because the thing is, now we're using game engines. Game engine has a technical pipeline backbone because it's like a game, right? So he was involved in coding and also streamlining the processing. He really developed a really cool facial capture system as well, utilizing Unreal Engine's Face Live. We had Andrea Tedeschi, who built all the assets for me, because as you know, you need to build assets to be able to move them around. And Andrea has been with me since the days I was making short films. And that's a good example of a symbiotic relationship you create from your short film, where he helped me out for nothing, and then hired him in my feature films. And now he's working on like these big animated projects with me. So it's nice to carry that relationship. And you have this shorthand of this person, because he knows exactly what I want, because he's worked with me so many years. So that's really nice to bring people up with you. So a thing that I try to do as much as I can. Let's not forget these guys as well, not just the visual guys, but we also have like, you know, Patrick Edward White, who Ed, who likes to be known, doing the music. He recently did the Gears of War Tactics, and we had the actors do the voices. You know, there's more of the actors again, working the actors, and without the voices, the animation is nothing. Okay, it's all part of the thing. And we end up spending 4 months, I think it was, putting this pilot together, which is now becoming this animated show, which is now being shopped around in Hollywood. But there's a 30-second clip of what the pilot episode ended up being like, all created in Unreal. And I have to say, this was our first time doing this in Unreal, so it was like nerve-wracking, but I think we pulled it off. Here's 30 seconds. Again, let me just stop my video so you can see this lovely video. Here you go.
I could spend my entire career analyzing just one planet, looking at one species, without ever knowing for sure if I got their history right.
Okay, so that's only 30 seconds, but you can watch the full thing on my website again, the full 12.5-minute action, which is very cool. And just real quickly, how we put that together, you know, everyone worked remotely. This was just before COVID hit, so we already had a remote working pipeline in place. So we use things like Trello, which is free to communicate and move things around and have like, you know, to-do lists done for review. Kind of very similar to like these high-end software like Shotgun, right? So so that was really cool. Good way of communicating rather than having millions of emails. It was very important that everyone's focused on creative and not going through a million emails. So this was a good way to communicate. We obviously built our CG character. We use Maya for building our characters, and we also use Blender as well. But this was a really cool way of building stuff, because what was really cool was this is the first version of the asset, and I will animate with that. And then halfway through, Ronan would update it to like, hey, we've got better hair. And I could just swap it out very easily. And I have to go back and redo all those steps. And that's another example why real time was so impressive, because the fact that I don't have to go through these various steps, I can just swap out the asset because it's all in real time. There's no pre-renders or compositing needed or anything. Facial capture. We couldn't afford to have animators animate faces and actually do actual animation. So we used the iPad to do facial capture. And that was a really cool thing, because I mean, I could do some of the faces as well, which is good fun. You can see there. And again, this is all free. This all comes as part of Unreal. You can download Unreal for free. I know I sound like I'm plugging Unreal here, but I think it's because I'm so fascinated with the fact that this is accessible to anyone and everyone who wants to do this. It's kind of democratized it a bit, right? And yeah, here's an example of the Unreal, without getting too technical. But this is an example of the actress coming in. We only had 1 day to use her voice. And what we did was, like, this iPad here would capture her face using the Depth AR kit on the iPad. But then we had this other iPad for video reference, so that we can also just evaluate what it will be like. So here's an example here. So that's the capture. And then the other side is the real footage. And what's useful for me as a filmmaker, I can go in and say, okay, there's certain things the iPad didn't really capture. We should go in and readjust that, like maybe certain eyebrows, certain eyeballs didn't move. But the main 70% of the capture was there. And that's a lot to work with already, rather than starting from scratch, okay? So that was cool. And then what I ended up doing was we then used something called motion mix. There you go. There's me. There's us adjusting. See the little keyframes here? There's us adjusting something, putting all the nuances back. Now, it wasn't perfect, but at the time, it was like, oh my God, we have life in this character without having to hire a team of animators. That was like mind-blowing for us. We used motion capture. Now, we didn't have motion capture studio, the budget didn't allow it, so we bought lots of motion capture libraries. And what I'll do is I'll kind of treat it like editorial. So yeah, we use Mixamo, by the way, Adobe Mixamo, which is part of the Adobe Creative Cloud. So we download a lot of Mixamo assets and we just retarget them to the Unreal Engine skeleton. And there you go here, see? Now we've got some movement. So I would go through the library. So I'll speed through this, share an example. So kind of like editorial, I was editing motion capture. So there'll be like a motion capture clip of someone kneeling and then someone getting up, and then I would mix the two together and time it, kind of choreographing various mocap clips to create the desired effect. And that was great because I can do all of this myself, right? So that means I can have time to experiment and stay within budget. We have to mention the giant robots. I mean, we just have to, okay? So, so Andrea created this amazing mech robot. We bought a bunch of kits from CG stores, like guns and metal pieces and all this cool like sci-fi kit bash elements. And we kind of kit bash together this robot. And this is all done in 3D Studio Max. And then from 3D Studio Max, we then exported out into Unreal Engine. And now you can see the robot in Unreal Engine. We did a lot of the look, all the lightings, all done in Unreal Engine. And it's really cool because I'm able to see this in real time. And Andrea would just save it and I'll open it, move the camera around. I'm like, oh my God, I can go up close and really analyze the asset. Whereas back in the day, like before Unreal, like I would have to look at renders or turntables. I have to wait a week for a turntable to be seen and then make notes and annotate. Here, I can just go in and start blocking stuff out. So that was like a bit of a game changer for us. You can see all the detail we're able to put in here. So I can make notes to put detail and all that stuff. Yeah, giant robots, cool. We also created like the environments using something called Quixel. Again, it's all part of Unreal. And so this is Andrea's work, it's not me. But Andrea's is like again, this is the first time him using Unreal Engine. But it's him like painting like puddles and stuff. And again, we all learned this via YouTube, man. We didn't go to school for this. This is us like wanting to make animated films. And we use that kit bash, which is you can buy these assets and build in assets and you just put them together and create what you want. So that was really cool. There you go. Speed through that a bit more. And again, I'm going to reiterate, this is real time. This is me moving in a computer while this is all happening. So to me, it's like, the whole feeling of missing out to being on set. I'm like, hey, I feel like I am on set now because I'm in this virtual set. And I'm doing things which probably I wouldn't be able to do if I was doing it in live action, okay? I'd have to build that for real. That would have been super expensive and time consuming. Let's show some other examples of me. We even did like motion graphics in Unreal Engine just by keyframing loads of shapes. So that was really cool to be able to keep everything in Unreal Engine. And a lot of that was control. It means that me or my team can go in and tweak stuff on the fly. There's never this external thing that we have to wait. We did the title sequence. I thought, hey, why not keep everything in real time? So we built it. So this would usually be done in After Effects or done as a separate designer. We thought, oh, let's make it part of the 3D sequence. Now we've got this 3D title sequence all in Unreal Engine, part of the scene, which is very cool. And here's some more examples of me just being very hands-on. I was able to do the lighting myself, and then Andrea will come in and just tidy it up for me. And that saved a lot of time. I was able to play different camera angles and do things that would just, whatever I imagined, I would just do. Whereas in live action, I'd have to storyboard it and then talk to various heads of departments or specialists to figure out how to do it. And you end up having to compromise. Whereas with animation in real time, literally do whatever I imagine I can just do. But the cool thing is, I am not relying on a team or a big team of people. I'm able to try things out myself. And then, and by the way, it's not just saying I did everything myself. Like things like this, moving the camera, doing all of the basic, like the main filmmaking work, I was able to do. But the things of building the big giant assets, building the environments, I can have Andrea focus on that because he's really good at that. So you really pick what you can do, what you can't do, and really delegate accordingly. But for me, having that control as a filmmaker to move around and have explosions in real time and really cut down the back and forth. Like conventionally, if this was not me doing this and there was an animator involved to put all the scenes, you have 6 animators each doing a sequence each. They'll send version. You spend weeks going back and forth. Can you change this? Can I change this? Whereas now I just got rid of that process. I'm now doing the things that take a while, go back and forward. I'm doing all of that. And the only notes I'm giving is, Andrea, can we have more detail on the robot? Can we have more guns on the robots? Or like, I'll talk to Ronan and say, hey, Ronan, can we do something with the lighting? Like, can we do something with the ray tracing? There's a lot of noise in there. And they'll go off and do that. So that's a great way of working. And also, like I said, the whole feeling of missing out being on set, because I'm not doing live action, right? So, especially not now anyway, because of what the situation is. So I wanted to do this really cool action scene, and I didn't want to do fake handheld. So I got this iPad and we live linked it using a thing called Dragonfly. And I was able to move around. This is me like moving around in an environment and really feel like I'm a cinematographer moving around. And it was cool, man. It really felt like the word virtual production was a really good example here. And I could just record all my camera moves and really have that handheld vibe, but really just have fun, because now it's not just a guy on a computer making movies. It's a guy that's with a camera in a virtual environment moving around and using computers to kind of help put this together. That was a new experience in making animated movies for me. And, you know, I've seen stuff like this on like the making of Avatar, like, oh, one day. And now I felt like, oh, this is what James Cameron must feel like making Avatar. Okay, maybe not that level, but still, you know, it felt good to do that. And lastly, you know, for Battlesuits, what you see is what you get. So there was no compositing. For those of you who don't know, whatever I did on Unreal was the final shot. And then we'll take it into color grading. We'll do a color grade and do some edits and sound. So the only post-production was editing, sound, and color grading. And that's it. There was no visual effects done externally. There's no compositing, nothing like that. All the lens flares, everything was all done in the game engine. And that's a big paradigm shift for me as well. So it was released, and this project was widely received. You know, it actually opened doors for me as a filmmaker, specifically Unreal Engine filmmaker, which I don't think existed like until recently. And again, like I said before, the whole PR things, I've got the same people to kind of PR. Firstshowing.net came on. Razer did a big whole spot about Made with Blades. I made it all on a laptop. I know, I like to make things hard for myself. And NVIDIA did coverage. And also it was on a weekly spotlight for Unreal. So now what I did was I pivoted my career, okay? This is like early this year, realized I'm not gonna get into live action work, but I still wanna be making a living telling stories, but I wanted to tell stories that I loved to tell. And I found a really good medium, which is animation, but I found it in real-time animation. And now I've pivoted into directing and producing these really fantastical ideas that I had into actual animation project. Because if you look around, like, you know, Netflix, Amazon, HBO Max, all of those streamers need content, and they want animated content because we can make them in the world of COVID and lockdown, right? So that was a huge thing for me. And what happened was some producers in LA reached out to me. And they're like, look, we love your thing. We love your thing you did, Battlesuits. We have this project called Mutiny at Zero, and we're looking for directors. And would you be interested? And I'm like, yeah, send me the game, free PlayStation game. I put the game on. The first logo I saw was made in Unreal Engine. I'm like, whoa, this is getting too weird. It's like everything's perfectly aligned. And so I reached out to the game developers, via the producers, and I said, hey, look, you know, I love your game. I want to do a pitch. I want to pitch this to you, but I want to show you what I want to do rather than just verbally pitch it. Even though my pitch was essentially Rogue One or Guardians of the Galaxy meets Mad Max Fury, which is kind of cool. And so they gave me the game assets, and the game assets are from the game here. And I put it in Unreal Engine, and, you know, we did some tidying up because it's a video game asset. We up-resed everything, and I showed them this test I did, and they're like, holy crap, this is amazing. So we're ready to go. You know, this was announced recently, by the way. You can see the announcement. IGN did a big announcement that I'm directing this, and it's been made into a feature, and there's a huge following for the game. So that was kind of important for me, was to have the blessing of the video game developer, because technically, legally, like, the publisher owns the rights to it. So the publisher can just do whatever they want in the game. But for me, I came from the video games background. I'm a gamer, okay? I love playing video games, so I respect the game developers so much. So I went to them and said, listen, I love your game, but, you know, this is my pitch. I want to respect the world. Do you have any other stuff that didn't go in the game? And they were so collaborative. And they're probably thinking, why aren't filmmakers doing that more often, working with game developers? Especially when we're making an animated film, you know, why recreate the assets, right? So we used those assets. We did a lot of work, obviously, up-res it to make it work for cinema and so on. But it was a great collaboration effort to get all of the assets. So literally, I didn't need to build the character because I love the character. Why would I redesign the characters? Like Sonic the Hedgehog. Like, why would I, right? I mean, the characters look great. So we kind of respected that. And this was around May, June. And we're ready to go. We're going to go, like, hire a big team to come on and make this animated film. We're going script development, all of that stuff. COVID hit hard in LA, and the investors were like, well, we're gonna have to hold back on financing anything yet until we see what the situation is. But there was so much momentum going, and the producers like, look, here's a bit of money to go and do some pre-production while things hopefully blow over. And the idea of pre-production money is to do some storyboards, do some tests, you know, just find your way, start doing some early prep. But here's the thing, like I showed you in Battlesuits, what you do in a game engine is literally what you see, what you get. So I was doing all these like test shots and showing them to the producer, and the producer's like, dude, I thought you were doing like tests and mock-ups, and I thought you're doing like pre-production, not making the actual film. I'm like, no, I am. I'm doing tests. That's what it looks like. They're like, why don't we just like make a sizzle reel then rather than do random tests? So we end up putting a sizzle reel together and using basically what the assets are going to be. We actually create some sequences to tell the story. And it's very important for me to tell a story in the sizzle reel to show what the tone is, what the story is, who our characters are, what the stakes are, how high the stakes are, and what essentially what is the plot, while showing what the aesthetics are going to look like. Now, this is early footage, so this does not mean that the final thing will look like this, but this is what got released with IGN. Give you an example. All right, again, let's do the classic stop the video. Here we go.
The Ark is humanity's last outpost, with the guidance of our leader, the Elder. He relies on stalkers, adventurers who leave the Ark, explore the zone, and scavenge for precious resources. Stalkers have to be more than human. That's me, Mr. More Than Human, a.k.a. a mutant. Our mission, he says, is a man, and that man is Hammond.
Sign us up for a suicide mission, Mr. Elder. This is insane.
The fate of the Ark depends on it.
You get to die. I have to live for all eternity. Oh, fantastic. Yeah! Seriously?
So I always have a smile on that. So that was only 60 seconds, by the way. You can watch the full 3.5-minute trailer on my website again, which I'll show you the link afterwards. The 3.5 minutes got way more scenes in there. There's some really cool lines in there that I really want you to check out. But for this presentation, I can only show 60 seconds. So as you can see, like the quality stepped up hugely. We're using a later version of Unreal Engine. Our skill set as a team, this is the same team, by the way, that did Battlesuit. So 3 of us. And then you got the sound guys. And it was very important to have this mantra collectively as a team, and which is every day you're only as good as your last show. And I'm pretty sure Oprah Winfrey wasn't the person that said it, but that was a quote that I found. So good on Oprah Winfrey. And so we really pushed hard for things like, what can we do bigger and better? And that's the thing. And the first one we did was source control. So we're not going too technical. Source control is a great way for everyone to version control their work. Because before, when Battlesuits, we were using Dropbox and saving a million versions, and it got a bit messy. So we learned from our lessons, and now we use something called Perforce, which is source control. So basically, I open the scene, I check it in. No one else can open that until I've saved it and check it back into the server again. A good way of checking history and stuff. So that was that's very useful. We built bigger sets, as you can see, huge, massive sets. Really big, because now we're a bit more confident with Unreal, like, yeah, let's go big or go home. And again, working the game developers, we had a lot of assets given to us, but then we built on top of those assets to make them bigger than they are. You can see here, it really felt like we're in this big cyberpunk-esque post-apocalyptic world, which is cool. And again, I'm able to play in that world as a filmmaker, be hands-on and not just wait for someone to give me stuff. So that's, again, really cool. You've got to have action. Or it's kind of a thing for me. I love action. And for me, like, there's this particular scene which you saw in the clip I showed you where the camera goes underneath the bike. That was a happy accident. So basically, I'm animating the scene where there's a bike chase, and I wanted the camera to go above the head, but I keyframed the camera to go at the bottom of the ground by accident. There must be a slip of a mouse or something. Like, I'm so excited when I'm working. And I played it back, like, ooh, that looks cool, and I tweaked it. So again, with real-time animation, you find those happy accidents. And for me, the closest thing I could relate to is being on set. You storyboard something based on a location, but when you turn up on the day, you're like, oh, this angle, I know we said we're going to shoot here, but this looks even better. It kind of reminded me of what it would be like when doing location scouting on a live action. Now I'm doing this in real time. And all of this, again, this is my computer. This is a screen capture of my computer. So, and again, I'm doing all of this in real time. And again, it's mind blowing as a director to be able to be hands on and not just direct verbally, but direct physically. And it's just amazing. Explosions, got to have explosions. So we improve our explosions massively. I think a lot of these explosions, there's a lot of explosions in this. I think a lot of that is because I watch a lot of Michael Bay films. Okay, I love Michael Bay movies, and clearly I've got an influence here. So I had to have lots of explosions, and and really make them really exciting and have the shape to them. So we use something called Niagara, which is the volume shape rather than animated cards. Again, like, maybe to blow shit up. It's really cool. Physics as well played a big thing. Adding physics again, we didn't have any of this on Battlesuit, so this is stuff we wanted to excel on the next one. And so, you know, with Mutiny Zero, we had things like physics on the cloak. Let me show you the physics on the cloak real quick. No, there you go. See, that's real physics. That's not someone animating the cloak. Now, as an audience, you're like, okay, cool, it's physics. But for me, I'm like, oh my God, there's physics. Now it just brings the character alive. And again, real time. What else is there? We built better human characters. One of the biggest critique we had on Battlesuits was the faces wasn't really as good as they should be. You know, some hardcore people out there, those trolls. But, you know, we listened. And so we used something called Reallusion, which is a very affordable piece of software. And we're able to do like really, really good detailed characters, but still stylized, because it's an animated film. We're not making, you know, we're not making Final Fantasy, or we're not making like photoreal here. We're making an animated film. So we're going to have stylized, but also for us to have emotion in the eyes. So this is called iClone, and this is Character Creator as well. And then we'll bring it into Unreal, and we'll do the rest of it in Unreal. So again, to have that level of integration is very, very cool. RTX stands for ray tracing. So again, without bogging down the detail, ray tracing is what you use to create photorealistic reflections and shadows and so on. But mainly a lot of it is reflections. And I didn't want to use ray tracing for the sake of ray tracing. So again, as a filmmaker, how can I use these graphical technology to tell stories? So for me, it had this really cool sequence where I wanted to reveal hordes of drones. So we track along the puddle, you see the reflection of the puddle, and then we slowly track up to see there's tons of them. So that idea came from just looking at like reflection. Oh my God, there's real reflections. What can I do to do some really cool filmmaking techniques? So that's another thing I always advise people is like, don't just use cool GPU, graphical processing effects for the sake of it. Try to integrate them as part of your storytelling technique. Okay, we're wrapping up now because I know I've gone over massively, but I just love sharing all the stuff with you guys. Lastly, I want to talk about virtual production, and that's a recent thing I recently did. In fact, it was only yesterday that this project got released. And what's interesting about this is now there's me. I'm back on set. Yay, I'm back on live action, but you know, masked up, being safe and everything. I'm using my experience as a live action filmmaker and all of the Unreal Engine animation stuff, like you see here, fusing that together to now make live action films. And this is a project I've done at Rebellion Studios, which is the game studios that also make films. They had the 2000 AD properties, which is really cool, like Judge Dredd and Mega City 1 and so on. And it's the owner, actually, that's the CEO of the company, who's really, really cool. And we had like a couple of days to put together this proof of concept short film and using virtual production. And for those of you who don't know what virtual production is, it's essentially, see that screen behind here? It's a big wraparound. And basically that's playing back a real-time CG environment. It's not playing footage, which means that when I move my real camera on set, the background's going to synchronize with it. Whoa, amazing, right? And that's real-time. This is Unreal Engine basically powering all of this. And they use the same technique, the exact same technique on the Star Wars show Mandalorian, which is how it all looks really cool. But also the good thing about this is not just having a synchronized background. The screens are so powerful that they light the actors. So you can see on this set here, there's no lights. All the lightings are coming from the screens. There's maybe one or two panel lights, just the key lights, but that's it. So that's an amazing experience. And we learned so much as a filmmaker. You kind of change the way you shoot stuff. But what was more important is the actors felt more immersed. Now, we could have done this on green screen, would have taken longer, and the actors probably would feel like, oh, I'm shooting green screen. Whereas here, you know, everyone on set can see it in action. There was no visual effects done in post afterwards, because we did the visual effects first, which is building the CG environments, work closely with the cinematographer, the production designers, to figure out what we have real in front and what's going to be background. And that's virtual production, which is a big buzz at the moment. I'm so glad I got to be part of that. Something so kind of forward thinking and making movies, but it's a new way of making films. It's a technique. Story's always going to be king. Script's always going to be the same, just a new way of telling stories. And you see there's not many people on set, which is very COVID friendly and very safe, which as a filmmaker is very important that everyone is safe. But also there's just so much we're able to achieve. So let me show you a little bit on what that is. You can watch the whole thing, by the way, if you just type in Percival, which is that thing up there, on YouTube, you'll see it. It's doing really well at the moment, actually. So here's some little clips I'm going to run through. So this is the scene here. So you can see the foreground is real objects, but the background is the Unreal Engine scene. But look how it's all lit. Look at the reflections on his face. Look at the reflections on his armor. If this was green screen, it'd be a friggin' nightmare, all those reflections. We have to get rid of them, de-spill them. Whereas here, we're embracing the reflections. We're like, yeah. And we use it to light the scenes, all the shadows and everything. So yeah, what you're seeing here is straight out camera. There's no visual effects here. This is straight out camera with a color grade. So that's the forest scene. Then if I zoom in here, there's a really good scene here. This is a really cool scene where we pull out. So, you know, keeping everything quite tight. We shot on the Arri Alexa. We shot anamorphic. So for those of you that don't know, anamorphic is a much more of a wider lens. There's a lot of distortion. Usually it's a no-no when you're doing visual effects because there's a lot of distortion. You have to like match that. Here, we're embracing anamorphic to give it that cinematic look and not worrying about visual effects because it's all in camera. And here you go, look, here's an example. And I'm gonna like demystify a little bit for you here, but you see that candle here? That's a real candle, but everything else is CG. So these are CG candles. So one of the tough things is how do you work with production designers and the CG team? And what's interesting is for the first time, I've never seen this before like a lot, but cinematographer, production designer, art department, everyone working with the visual effects team right at the start. As opposed to traditionally, production designers, art department do their stuff on set, put a big green screen, that's it, and they go, and then the visual effects guys have to figure it out. This is a collaboration effort where everyone got to work together to achieve the final picture. So that was amazing. So now I'm going to shut up because obviously I've done way too much talking, but I'm hoping you guys have taken something from there that motivates or inspires you. But ask me some questions now. Yeah. Pippa, over to you.
Thanks, Hasraf. That, I mean, I've chatted to you before, but I've never really sort of heard like all of that, and it's quite overwhelming. And so you've got a very like varied career and a variety of things, and it's super interesting. I mean, like, so please, yes, do send your questions, and you just pop them in the Q&A box at the bottom. I've got a couple of questions for you that I've sort of been making notes as we've been going. So the first thing, and something that you and I have talked a little bit about before, but I think is really relevant here, is that budgets. You know, people always think that you need this like super high-end equipment or whatever to get started. It's like, oh, I can't start doing this thing because I don't have the right camera or I don't have enough money to do whatever. But I think, you know, I think what is really demonstrated here is that you actually, it's really just, you can do whatever you want, even on something like on your cell phone. I mean, there's like, you know, films that have been made, shot on people's cell phones. You know, I mean, what would you say to people in that regard? Like, what do you need to get started?
Well, you know, it's interesting you bring the cell phone thing. There's a really quick story about that. So when I was doing the Beyond, obviously I was getting notes and feedback from like other producer friends of mine that I wanted to get some notes. And I remember like we realized we didn't get one shot, and this one shot that was very important, and we couldn't go back and get people on and hire cameras again. So what I did was I got my iPhone. We just shot it on my iPhone, and then we shot it like, you know, quite nice iPhone resolution, and we cut it back in. No one could tell the difference between the iPhone footage and the Blackmagic camera footage. Now imagine if I went back to the producers and go, hey, listen, we're going to shoot this on an iPhone. You're like, oh no, you can't do that, it's going to look crap. So sometimes it's better just go ahead and do it.
Won't fit with the aesthetic.
Right, exactly. No one really cares how it's done as long as it looks right. Okay, and yeah, even for the Disney show. Now the Disney show is a much bigger budget, but the interesting thing is that I'm still using my guerrilla filmmaking techniques to work on a Disney show. Yeah, for example, there's a scene in that trailer I showed you where the camera zips underneath the truck. Okay, well, I remember pitching that because I really loved that movie Crank, where the camera zips underneath the car and stuff. And I remember pitching it, and the head of production at Disney and also the production service company in Canada were like, oh man, we need the big expensive rigs, we need to have green screens, it's gonna be a big visual effects number, and we need 4 days to set this up. And I'm like, why don't we just like stick a GoPro on a skateboard and do it? And the look I got, like, this, how dare you suggest such low-fi, low budget, this is high quality. So I'm like, oh, okay, cool, my bad, sorry, this is how I would do it. So we were all having lunch, and me, the cinematographer, and the first AD, and one of the gaffers who had a radio control car, we're like, should we just do that test and just see? You don't need to tell anyone, right? So we stuck the GoPro and we did the shot, and we put it in the trailer in the edit, and everyone's like, oh my God, this looks amazing. It's in the trailer. I mean, you just saw it's in the trailer. No one could tell it was a GoPro shot. It's a super quick shot. And after Disney were like, wait, so did we have a budget to do this? I'm like, no, it's on the GoPro. They're like, no. I have to show them on my phone that I filmed. So yeah, sometimes the best ideas are the most lo-fi ideas. Even the idea of filming visual effects on the screen, put it back in camera. Verbally saying it sounds ridiculous, but when you do it, that's movie making, that's movie magic, and that's the whole idea. You don't need to go expensive cameras. Like my short films were shot on DSLRs, and phones. You know, it's really about a good story. That's what it's really about.
Yeah, and you don't know until you try, you know. I think, and
Totally.
that actually leads me to my next thing, is that, like, you know, you've obviously got a real willingness to learn new software and new techniques and things like that. How important do you think that is for somebody looking to sort of break into that industry? Because I find that if I look at my own personal experience, a lot of it has been down to, you know, the point where you just kind of go, someone asks you to do something and you go, well, I don't really know how to do that, but sure, I'll give it a try. And then, and it grows into something bigger. And I feel like that's a really important quality to have.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the whole Unreal Engine thing, for example, like, it wasn't like I one day woke up and go, hey, I'm going to learn Unreal Engine. I mean, look, I'm the sort of guy that I don't even read manuals, okay? I'm so bad, unless I have to build furniture, then I should. But you know, when it comes to software, like for Unreal, it wasn't that I'm going to sit there and learn Unreal Engine, because at first I didn't have the time, but also I just don't want to sit there for hours going through tutorials, right? So if you know what you want to achieve, and I knew what I wanted to do, I wanted to get access to a camera, a virtual camera. I wanted to build a set. I wanted to move some characters around and block my scenes. That's all I wanted to do. So I would go on YouTube and go, how do you set up a camera in Unreal Engine? Boom, 5-minute tutorial. How do I import assets from Maya or Blender? Boom, and they'll come out. So when you have a goal to achieve something, you find learning becomes more fun because you're learning with a target in mind. And that's how I learn new software. And it's like you said, sometimes you get asked like, hey, can we do this? You're like, sure. You're like, oh, I gotta figure this out. Yeah, totally. I'll do it. But you know what? That's the best way to learn, because now you really got to achieve it. Whereas if you was to do it as a learning thing, you're like, oh, I'm just learning. Doesn't matter. So definitely problem solving is not just solving problems, but you learn. I mean, I learn every day. Like every day, every project is a new set of challenges. There's never a project I've ever done where it's like, oh, we just do what we did in the last one. We just do it again. No, there's new ambitions. People's expectations are higher now. You know, I mean, if you look at the latest video games, they're so good. You're like, oh my God, like, how do you match that? So you have to find ways.
Yeah, and so actually on that note, there's a question that's come in from George Leong. So do you think virtual studios and Unreal is the future of VFX production? And how does this impact the older generation of VFX artists that are perhaps stuck in their ways?
Good question. I don't think it's going to like take over. Here's the thing, like, you still need visual effects artists, even when you're doing virtual production, okay? You need someone to build the assets. So you need a good modeler. You need a good character designer. You need a good shader. You need a good rigging artist that put the skeleton on for you, okay? You still need animators to animate this thing. The only difference is we're in a virtual environment, which means that we're in a real-time environment. We don't have to have so many processes now. A lot of these processes can work together. I don't think you'll ever like make people redundant. Absolutely. Here's another thing, virtual production. The last thing I just showed you, you know, with the thing on set with the LED screens. Now I remember posting that on a Facebook group, like one of those Facebook groups, like, you know, like nostalgia movie sets. Like, you know, here's a picture of us working on this movie. And the backlash I got were from old school production designers, old school filmmakers saying, well, there's us out of a job. I'm like, no, you're missing the point, guys. We still need production people. We still need art department to build the foreground stuff. Because the only way virtual production works is when you trick the eye, where you show some real stuff in front and then the rest of it is digital, which like Mandalorian works so well. You know, they've got the table, which is real, everything else is fake. So you need good people that still work on set. It's just the difference is now they have to learn and adapt a new set of skills on top of their job. That's all it is. But we'll never eliminate people that are working traditional ways. Absolutely no way.
As you're saying, a willingness to learn new skills, I think that's really important. I find it quite curious, I suppose, that, you know, you kind of started in video games and then you've sort of ended up back in
full circle
in the same space, but in a different way. Because I mean, it's very reminiscent of like early machinima in a lot of ways.
Yes.
You know, like sort of looking at like the way machinima was made so many years ago. I don't even really think that's a thing anymore. Like there used to be whole websites.
I remember.
Where people would make like short films, sometimes full-length films, all completely just, you know, through in-game cameras. With in-game assets.
Halo was a good one. Red versus blue.
Red versus blue, exactly. And it's really curious and interesting for me to see how almost it's what was a very subversive niche market has suddenly now kind of on the rise as people are starting to explore that in a different kind of way, which I mean I really love, and it's I think it's I'm very curious to see how that changes and sort of, and what you, like, you know, as you were saying, you've started one way and then gone on to something else and then changed and gone on to something else. I'm very curious to see.
I think it's pivoting. I think it's the pivoting though, right? Like, you know, there's always been this thing. Like, I remember back in the day, like when I worked in video games and I wanted to work in film, and there was a level of snobbery with film. Like, oh no, you're in video games. No, we make films. We make cinema. You make video games. That stay in your lane. Whereas now, you know, and also it was very hard for people to jump from one industry to another. Like I said, when I moved, I was a senior CG artist at a games company called Codemasters. And then when I went to visual effects, I had to start at a lower ground again, like being a roto artist, and work my way up. And today it's very different. Today, people have jumped from the film industry to games and back and forth because the quality is still the same, the tool sets are still the same, the expectations are still the same, and the technology, you were using game technology to make films. And the films are looking at games for story ideas now. So it's the lines are really blurred, and that's exciting from a content point of view, but also from a career point of view. So now you're not just stuck in games. You can jump and make films or both at the same time. And that's exciting for the new next generation of artists, but also the people that have been doing it for years. They now have more options to work with.
Okay, we're going to have to wrap up, but like any sort of parting words, I think, for everyone who's watching.
I think the big parting words is always keep learning. You know, just keep striving to learn new things. Like every morning when I'm having breakfast, I watch YouTube, I look at some of the trailers, I read the latest innovations of graphics that are coming out. Now, I'm not a technician, I'm not a technical guy at all, no, by far, but I find that influences the type of stories I tell. And also strive to work with as many people as possible. I'm just lucky that I'm in a world where I can work with an artist in New Zealand or an artist in Canada and learn from them and learn from other people, you know, listen to people as well. Like, even though I'm the director, I always listen to people when they're speaking in notes, because you learn so much from each other. I think that was more than one, wasn't it?
Well, it was, but it was fine. I got a couple of comments, and I'm sorry, I don't think we're going to be able to answer them because we're quite like over time here, but just I wanted to mention them to you. So
sure.
From Thomas Walsh, she says, a film student here coming from an animation perspective, I love to hear about so many people concept developing with unorthodox methods. Really feels like everything is tying together more and more. Cool. And yeah, I mean, I think that really is, you know, it is nice to see everything kind of coming together, and the collaboration. And I think COVID has really forced people to collaborate in different ways.
Yes.
So yeah. So just one last thing for everyone. Thank you very much, Has, for joining us. If you don't if you don't want to catch this talk again, you can catch it on demand in about a day or so on the Promax website. And thank you so much for joining us. This has been super inspirational, and we hope to see you again. I really am. I'll be following all the things that you're doing with interest.
Thanks again, Pippa, and thank you to everyone who tuned in as well. Like, you know, it's a shame that I didn't have much time, but you know, download the on-demand version, comes out in a couple of days. You know, I speak quite fast, so you probably want to go back and forth a few times. But that's the beauty of demand, right? That's the cool thing about demand. Yeah.
Just maybe to mention your website again quickly before we leave.
Yeah, no, absolutely. In fact, let me just quickly screen share real quick so people can Snapchat it real quick. Here you go. So yeah, so there's my website. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram. And the thing about my socials, I put a lot of behind the scenes. So every day I put behind the scenes on there. It's not just pictures of me and my cat, okay? There's more. So you know, I put lots of photos in there, and hopefully you can reach out to me. You can ask questions. I'm quite responsive. So yeah, feel free to check the stuff out. And all the full length version you can watch on my website. Thank you again.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks very much, everyone. Hope you have a wonderful day.
Bye.